just like physical illness, mental illness can be overcome. We just got to inspire people to believe that.
The mental health community and the firearms industry spend way too much time running parallel to each other without communicating. It's time we change the narrative and destroy the stigma that we both face.
Walk the Talk America presents Guns and Mental Health, a podcast for firearms owners, clinicians, and the curious public.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Guns and Mental Health podcast. I'm your host, Michael Cedini. I am joined today by my co-host, Kevin Berry. Kevin, how are you doing?
Doing good.
That's great, Kevin. It's always good to have you here. We have an awesome guest today. We have a guest that when you read his resume, it almost reads like a guy who's trying to impress a woman and is going to make up a bunch of lies. We have the real Jack Ryan, Nick McKinley. Nick, it's so great to have you here, man. How are you?
Hey, thanks, Michael. It's good to be here. Doing well. It's funny. When I met my wife, I was, under a cover and inside a very, very boring cover that actually was very non-impressive. And she dated me for a while anyway until I broke cover. And then when I broke cover to her and was like, I worked at the CIA. She's like, what? Really? Are you sure?
Yeah, man, it's crazy because when a mutual friend of ours introduced me to like your background, and he was like, "Oh, you'd be a great guest for the show." And every once in a while we get these guests, and you just kind of, like I said, you read about their history and the things they've accomplished, and sometimes it's like, I was talking to Kevin about this. I was like, I wonder if Nick sometimes just lies to people and says like, "Yeah, I work at a bicycle factory," right? Like just to unpack like everybody who's like, if I really don't want a human today, but now someone's going to, I'm going to be like, yeah, I was this and that. And so speaking of that, I'm going to let you give a little bit of a history about who you are and how you got to where you're at now. And this starts at, Harvard and goes all the way to the CIA. And then now you're doing like some awesome work in human trafficking is a hot topic in this country. And we're going to talk about brain health today. We're going to talk about firearms. So, I'm excited to do this, but why don't you just give a little background about your history?
Thanks. So my history is as just proof that God actually does use the foolish things of this world to accomplish his ends. I grew up in Montana. Great place to grow up, is where I live now. And left to join the Air Force pararescue teams. I did that for 10 years, got recruited to the Central Intelligence Agency, spent a number of years there within one of what I call the kinetic units. Contrary to popular belief, most people who are at the CIA they type a lot and they're not fit and they can't fight. I got to be part of one of the units that has to take a physical fitness evaluation, and our job was to fight. And I was very fortunate to be there. And I left to do a number of things, mainly to jump into the tech space. I started a software company. I run a charity called Deliver Fund, and we're a counter human trafficking organization. So we provide data, technology, and intelligence to law enforcement agencies around the United States to help them find human traffickers and hopefully put them behind bars. And then I work as a strategic advisor in private equity and venture capital circles as well. So I'm a busy guy these days. Plus, I've got an amazing wife and a couple young children.
Yeah, I could. I'm thinking about just like your journey, right? And I heard you on another show, and you were talking about kind of all the amazing things you've accomplished, and we could sit there and rattle them off. But how did you get into this space? Like, what was the aha moment, like the light bulb moment for you to kind of tackle human trafficking? And then I also want to talk about how you're doing that right now, because I think that's very interesting. Because when I think of when people think about human trafficking, I think they think like we got to just go kick down doors and go catch people like that, right? Like they don't really think about the way you're approaching it.
So the way that to answer your first question, how did I get into this? If I was, from a career standpoint, a counterterrorism guy. And while we were doing some counter narcotics work as well in southern Afghanistan, the primary bulk, it was counterterrorism. You cannot be involved in that world and not continually bump up against human trafficking. And once I realized what it was, I just thought that there was a version of me somewhere that was doing something about this issue, right? I mean, you think about it from the counterterrorism perspective, we can kill people with flying robots from 6,000 miles away. Surely somebody's doing something about people who are trying to sell children. And that was my mindset. And it wasn't until I was in southern Afghanistan and we had what I like to call smoking gun intel on a human trafficker who was selling children across the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. And when we wrote that up and tried to put it into the system, right, and contrary to, again, what Hollywood tells people, everything in the intelligence community has routing codes, right? Similar to your bank, where, if I want to wire you some money, I have to put in the right codes in order for that money to actually get to you, or it'll end up getting to somebody else. And so if you want the intelligence to get to the right person, you have certain codes that you use to make sure that it gets to the right person who needs to see it. Well, we couldn't find a code to route to a place that dealt with human trafficking. And we just thought we were missing something. And it was myself and a Joint Special Operations Command counterpart that was working this issue. And finally, after a period of weeks, we just figured out that there really was no place to send this intel. And then that made me very curious, and I started digging into the systems. And when you're at that level in the intelligence community, there's kind of nothing that's off limits to you. I mean, you can reach into nuke stuff, you can reach into really anywhere you need to go. And now, if you start reaching into places you shouldn't be, you're going to get a visit by some guys in suits real quick who are going to ask you why you were poking around in parts of the system that you didn't have a reason to be in. But that made me start doing a lot of research throughout the federal government, trying to figure out who was doing what in the fight against human trafficking. And what I found was that within the federal government, at least, there were some groups, DOJ, the Department of Homeland Security, who are doing some work in the fight against human trafficking, and good people really doing their best. But there was just not very many of them. The major majority of people fighting human trafficking were state and local law enforcement, and yet they didn't have any of the budget, any of the training, any of the technology, any of the cool toys. They didn't have any of it. They were just out there, sometimes one man or one woman wrecking balls, just trying to do the best that they could within their city. And that was something that when I saw it, I realized that was a solution that I could take a stab at, or I'm sorry, a problem I could take a stab at trying to create a solution for, because mathematically, and when you look at the economics of illicit commodity markets, and that's what we're talking about when we talk about human trafficking, we're talking about victims being sold as commodities in an illicit market. Well, that's something we understood relatively well from the fight against terrorism and the fight against narcotics. So my thesis was that we could take the same technologies and methodologies that we were using in the counterterrorism fight and tweak them so that they were target centric and target specific for the human trafficking fight. And that's how I got into it.
Yeah, it's really fast.
That was 10 years ago.
Yeah. How many years?
10 years ago.
10 years ago. Okay. Because I feel like, so I got into the mental health and firearms space in 2018, and I hit it right at a time when mental health started to move to the forefront, right? I feel like I caught a wave. Mm-hmm. So it made perfect sense to kind of incorporate like the firearms industry with mental health. One of the things that I've realized lately, and I started to think about this after I was introduced to what you're up to or what you're doing in this fight, is there are so many people in the firearms community, the 2A community, that have been human trafficked, that literally took up their right to arm themselves and protect themselves and be their own first responder because they were a victim of human trafficking. I go to a lot of training sessions and just have come across just certain people that basically have, they share their story of why they're here now. And it's just like, wow. And I guess what I'm thinking in my head is like, you saw something back then And I feel like human trafficking is now like that wave has happened. Like there's been more attention to it. Like, do you feel that way, or do you feel like you were onto something before it kind of got popular?
So for sure, onto something before it got popular. Now, the fact that people are talking about this is great. There's a lot of myth out there. No, human traffickers are not putting zip ties on your car door handles to try to traffic you, ladies. When you see that stuff on social media, just delete it because it's complete garbage. No, you do not have to worry about, it's not that you don't have to worry about it, but the predominant form of human trafficking is not, the white van with free candy painted on the side that's driving through a neighborhood and is going to snatch a kid out of a yard. It's not the way it works anymore. Human traffickers predominantly use smartphones, internet connected technologies in order to groom and manipulate victims into participating in essentially their own abduction into human trafficking networks. So that was something I think I understood relatively early on because we saw it in the fight against terrorism. You had these lone wolf terrorists that were being created and really radicalized through internet connected technologies that predominantly ended at somebody reading something on a smartphone. And social media was a big part of that. So I could connect those dots a little faster, I think. But now here we are 10 years later, and everybody is starting to see the reality of it. Part of that is because of a lot of good work on behalf of law enforcement, other NGOs, but also the work that we've been doing at Deliver Fund. We train or provide data to over 450 law enforcement agencies around the United States. I think the number is actually bigger than that now. So if we're making them better. And the way that we fight it is by fighting human trafficking at the scale of the problem. Yes, people want to see guys kicking doors and things like that. And I mean, I did 30 combat deployments. I know as much about kicking doors as anybody alive. That's not the way to do things. Unless you have a badge and a gun, then that's exactly the way that you should be doing things, right? But if you're a civilian, I mean, we have a line of T-shirts on the Deliver Fund website, which is deliverfund.org. Just click the shop button. And one of them says, from shooters to computers, because we're just keyboard nerds now. That's what we do. We collect data, we process it into intelligence, and we provide it to law enforcement so they can go kick doors and do that action guy movie stuff.
Do you ever want to do that? Actually, I mean, this is such a
every single day.
Yeah.
People ask me all the time, like, do you miss the CIA? Do you miss, the military special ops community? And every single day. I miss it a lot, but it's not in the best interest of my children for me to be constantly gone, 10 months a year anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your background with firearms?
Where do you want to start? Obviously, grew up in Montana. Up here, you give you, when you get your driver's license, they just give you some firearms, right? You just pick which ones.
Right.
No, not really. But I think I got my first firearm when I think it was 22 long rifle. My dad gave me, and I was probably a young teenager. Started hunting, whatever the age was when you start hunting in Montana, right after going through hunter safety and all that. And so, and I thought I knew how to shoot because, my dad and my grandpa taught me how to shoot. And then I got to the military and I realized I didn't know anything about shooting. I didn't know anything about, I knew a little bit about marksmanship, but I didn't know how to fight with a weapon. Obviously the military, that's kind of their specialty. And so, a couple of weeks of training in Air Force pararescue teams that were very specifically focused on just the manipulation of the firearm, just the marksmanship component. And then, months of training beyond that in how to fight with that weapon. And then I got to my teams, and then they were sending us to places like Gunsight and Thunder Ranch and Shaw's and all these shooting schools. Plus I was working with some of the best units in the world, right? I was working with Delta and, the SEAL Team 6 and different entities. And so getting to learn from them. Then I got to the Central Intelligence Agency, and unlike most people at the CIA, my job was to carry a gun in anger. I mean, that's what we did. If we were not carrying a weapon, with few exceptions, but most of the time, if we were not carrying a weapon, we weren't at work. In fact, there's a special program that my unit was really the one that was responsible for providing the manpower for. And we had lots of different weapons that were in different locations so that we could appropriately respond to circumstances. And so it got to a point where, a handgun was just like a pen to me. It was just an extension of my hand. And it just, it sounds cliche to say, and it sounds really stupid, but it was very true. One of the things that I was taught in the military and then even further at the CIA was that the weapon, the handgun, the rifle, the belt-fed machine gun, the grenade launcher, whatever it was, the pen, that was just a tool. I was the weapon. And so that was really the mindset was, picking the best tool for the job that you had been assigned.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I always find it interesting because I think the assumption of everybody that is in the military or has a background, say CIA, is a gun person. But it sounds like that you are sort of a gun person, right? You grew up with them; they're a big part of your life.
I wouldn't call me a gun person. I wouldn't call me a gun guy just because I have so many friends who are gun guys, right? And they can tell you the nomenclature and this round is this fast, and that's why you don't want this other type of round. I couldn't tell you any of that stuff. I used the weapons I was issued. I was really good with the weapons I was issued. And really, when it comes to fighting with firearms, you're a thinker first. That's your job, is to make split-second nonlinear life and death decisions. The method with which you create solutions is a firearm, but not always. Sometimes it might have been a blade. Sometimes it might have been, whatever you had handy. Sometimes it might have been just, be smart enough to not get in the shootout in the first place. Right. I mean, that was, people often don't think about it, because when most people think about firearms and most people think about fighting with firearms, they think about it through the lens of Hollywood, because that is their experience, because they didn't go do it for real. And even when you look at even the law enforcement community, I mean, how many actual shootings do law enforcement get in versus how many people they come into contact with? It's actually very, very minuscule. And so you got to keep in mind, one of the best ways to win a gunfight is not to get in the gunfight in the first place.
Yeah, de-escalation. Yeah. Like stay out of it. That's one of the things that I always try to, when I'm at a speaking engagement and I'm talking to people that are there, especially new gun owners, right? And there's always this element of, we have to talk about what happens in a defensive shooting. And they usually have like a lawyer or somebody talking to them. And it's important. I think that's important. You need to know that you can't just shoot somebody and, your life is going to become hell if you do, even if you're in the right? Like there's just so many elements that are going to come down upon you that are just going to be awful. But I always try to tell people, I'm like, you're more likely going to kill yourself with your own firearm than ever get in a shootout. So you need to have a mental health plan and a suicide prevention plan as a gun owner, just in case that day of crisis does come, right? It's sobering, like thought, like nobody, guns are fun, right? People want to buy, but it's like, that needs to be part of the plan. You had mentioned, and I kind of want to touch on a few things here and then we'll circle back, but you talked about brain health, mental health. Obviously you've seen some real stuff, right? Like real life situations. You probably wasn't a time where you didn't have this thought like, I could die next week, right? Especially with the things that you're doing. Were you always aware?
Or in the next hour.
Yeah, next hour.
or oh, so this is how I'm going to die. Like that went through my head quite often.
Well, I think it was the Vice video I was watching of you, and you guys were talking about a situation where it was like you had guns pointed at you and they were trying to pull you out of a car and you put the seatbelt on, right? I mean, that's stuff that all can affect your mental health, right? And you made
for sure
decisions there. But yeah, so how did you, were you always cognizant of mental health and brain health? And
among Walk the Talk America's partners, Arms Corps may have the most colorful history of them all. But then again, that likely happens when you have a company that's lasted for more than a century. Started in 1905 in the Philippines and expanding operations to right here to Nevada in 1985, ArmsCorps offers some of the finest firearms you'll find on the market. From shotguns to 1911s, and from ammunition to a competitive shooting team, ArmsCorps offers a lot. But there's something more. ArmsCorps is the first manufacturer to print the free and anonymous mental health screenings link offered through Walk the Talk America's website right there on their packaging. If you buy an ArmsCorps product, you will not only see our flyer inside, but you may actually see the screenings link printed on the side of the box. Go to armscor.com, that's armscorps.com, to find out more about their heritage, their products, and their competitive shooting team. We're proud and thankful to have ArmsCorps as a partner.
No. No. It wasn't until I was I think I was on my third or fourth deployment at the agency when I started realizing that something was wrong. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that something had changed and something was wrong. And I had been gone 10 months a year every year since I was probably 20 years old. And it, lots of life and death type stuff, lots of boredom too, lots of good training. And I just knew that something was off. But what I have learned since, to kind of flash forward to today, is that the issues I was dealing with were not primarily mental health related, even though there was portions of that, right? There was some pots that were starting to boil over. It was actually largely brain health related, and my neurotransmitter levels were not where they needed to be. My endocrine system was completely jacked up from chemical exposures and traumatic brain injury and micro traumas to my brain because of all the things that I had experienced. I was actually at the Amen clinics getting a brain scan. And they fill you full of these radioactive dyes and put you in a CT machine, and you lay there for a while, and then they come back and about a week or so later they give you your brain scans, and I have copies of them, and there's parts of my brain that, because it's measuring blood flow, look like they have holes in them, right? I mean, like the brain and certain parts just kind of looks like Swiss cheese. And the doctor was like, "Hi, I wonder what happened there," like pointing to the spot on the back of my head. And I was like, "Oh, I'll tell you exactly what happened there. That was a free fall accident where I eggshelled it. I hit the ground so hard I eggshelled a helmet." And so when we talk about brain health and mental health, I think there's a Venn diagram there, and there's some overlap, but we have to always keep in mind that just because somebody experienced something traumatic, right? So I actually was an orphan. I was abandoned by my father before I was born, and I was abandoned by my mother roughly around the age of 2. I don't know exactly when it was. It literally dropped me on the steps of an orphanage, right? Late 1970s. And so that's a lot of trauma. Now, you don't realize it until you get older and you're like, okay, well, maybe there's some mental health issues I have to deal with here. But the symptoms that you get from, say, experiencing trauma as a young child, well, you can get the exact same symptoms from just having a structural problem, right? Which is the actual brain itself does not work the way that it's supposed to because of physical trauma. But then that emotional trauma can also cause structural issues. And so, one of the things that I think that the mental health community needs to do is just take a little bit of a step back and say, hey, let's not just drop prescription drugs on people. Let's look at the brain as an organ first. Let's make sure that the neurotransmitter levels are where they need to be. Let's make sure that there's not a structural issue, an endocrine issue, something that is actually causing these symptoms. Let's make sure to get that fixed first, or in parallel to, say, things like therapy and mental health counseling and those types of things. Like we need to consider the whole of what is above the head or what is above the shoulders. Right? Is somebody have sleep apnea to the point that their sleep is just absolute trash, and that's why they're having mental health issues, is because they're not sleeping. Because we know that anybody who doesn't sleep well ends up with mental health issues. I mean, that is a very well-established science. We know that just because somebody experienced some childhood trauma, I'm probably an example of that being essentially post-traumatic thriving as opposed to post-traumatic stress. But then there's other things in my life that, happened overseas that do cause a little bit of post-traumatic stress. And so I think that we tend to view these, mental health and physical health and brain health and sleep health, we tend to view them all in a vacuum, when the reality is they all work together. And that's something I think the mental health community really needs to have a hard conversation with themselves about. So there's a doctor named Dr. Chris Free who just published a book called Operator Syndrome. And while that is not probably relevant to most of your listeners, it's very relevant to former operators like me. And what he has found is that there's this framework that leads to, say, veteran suicides, where because we're not considering the entire person, we're just trying to push an easy button, diagnose with somebody with PTS, give them a pill, and then send them home. And then they lose hope because you're not solving the actual problem. And so that's where I look at brain health as the foundation, like make the organ work well. That is the foundation of true mental health.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I feel like, just like anything, right? Just like politicians try to do the whole like, well, if we just ban this or do this, like we've solved it.
Right.
And it's a much more nuanced conversation, right? About everything.
Right.
And I try to, me personally, I have a lot of friends that have taken medication and it works for them. So I don't want to stereotype anyone that takes meds. We don't want to stigmatize it, right? But
right. No, I take meds and they work for me, but only because I actually have to take less of them now, but only because I've been focusing on getting the organ of the brain healthy. Right. So like that's where this one size fits all piece, and I apologize for interrupting you, but this, like, I don't want to stigmatize anybody, but we do it's a holistic view. You are different than me. You require different solutions than me, and vice versa.
Yeah. And I'm also glad you said it that way too, because let's face it, how many people actually do what you're saying, right? How many people step back and say, okay, I'm going to take these meds, but I'm also going to quit drinking, or I'm going to keep a diary of what I'm eating, or I'm going to get proper sleep, right? Like, and I think you have to kind of step back and say, okay, while I'm doing this, I'm going to try these other things, or I'm going to try these improvements, right? Like, don't go out. If someone just says, hey, I got these SSRIs and we're just going to prescribe them to you and everything's going to be great, and it's like, okay, you're still at the club on Saturday partying, getting wrecked, right? Like that's not how you take it. You got to monitor this stuff. So it's, no, like I said, I appreciate that. Now, was there a light bulb moment for you in this space as well? Because, like you had that moment where you were looking at the situation with human trafficking. Was there a light bulb moment for you for mental health and brain health?
So for me, and this happens to almost every operator who was in combat. Keep in mind, not every operator has really served in combat or served at any level that could potentially cause problems. I mean, I know a guy who was a Navy SEAL and never, even though he was in during the war, he never actually deployed to the war. And that can probably cause its own mental health issues with people like that. And so, for me specifically, I started noticing that something was wrong, started fixing it myself, because nobody really had any solutions. So I dove into the textbooks, and actually in my spare time, I was studying neuropharmacology and studying, neurology writ large, and understanding how the brain works, and really getting into the nootropic space. And I experimented and tried everything that was illegal. And I had friends who were experimenting and trying with things that were illegal. And so it was interesting to just kind of see what happened. But for me, I just realized that I had to start taking control of this myself, because the pots, that's what we call it, is the pots start boiling over, or the boxes start touching. When you're an operator and you're deploying overseas and you're doing life and death stuff, life gets pretty binary. Either you come off of an operation walking, or not walking, or in a body bag. I mean, that's really really the options. And so you don't really have to come face to face with all the things you should have been dealing with for 20 years. And it just kind of you just continue to like put it in storage as a way to think about it. But then when you suddenly are no longer doing that work, it takes a little while, but your body will actually start to decompress. Your brain will start to decompress, and those boxes that you've put in storage, they start opening. And then you end up with these I call it issue stacking or problem stacking, where any one of the problems are easy to deal with, but you suddenly end up with more and more issues, and you're kind of fighting this internal silent battle. And simultaneously, your brain health starts falling off a cliff. And for me, there was a moment where my daughter was standing in the kitchen, and she had a set of tongs in her hand. And she was probably, I don't know, 1-ish, 1.5, 2, something like that. And she said, "Daddy, what are these?" And I remember going, "That's a really good question." Right? I couldn't remember what tongs were called. And that's when I kind of hit the panic button and was like, all right, I need to go see a professional and start getting this figured out. Now, luckily, I chose the Amen clinics, there's plenty of other good ones, but luckily when I got my brain scans and stuff back, they looked at the history I had told them about, which is something you remember very well, obviously, because it was created under stress. But then they're looking at my brain scans. They're like, well, your brain's pretty messed up, but it should be a lot worse. Why isn't it worse? Well, it was because I had been doing all the research, and, I stopped drinking alcohol, and my diet was full of, organic natural proteins, and a bunch of grass-fed beef and MCT oil. And I was doing the whole bulletproof coffee thing back in like 2010. I've been doing it every morning since. And so I was getting the MCTs, and I was getting all the, butyric acids and all the things that I needed, but that was just getting me to about the 60% mark. Well, that last 40% eventually caught up with me. And so the good news is I'd been doing things that had prophylactically kind of helped to protect and rebuild my brain and keep things from being worse. The bad news was that I took what is usually about a 3 to 4 year timeline where guys start having problems, and I extended that out to, 6-ish years. And so I kind of fell off the cliff faster.
Wow. Yeah. I never really thought about it that way, but that's really interesting. So when you're all the things that you've accomplished, right? There, and you had these issues, like you had that moment where, and I makes me nervous because I'm like, man, I forget things all the time, and I don't really have excuses. Maybe old football injuries or something like that, right? But like,
hey, that's real. That's very real.
Yeah, well, brain injuries are very real, and I feel like the overlap that you talk about when it comes to mental health and brain injuries is. We've had guests on this show before. It's kind of like Lyme disease, right? Like a lot of people that suffer from Lyme disease will be misdiagnosed with mental illness, right? And not realizing that it's something like Lyme disease. There are so many people that have a brain injury, and people are just like, okay, it's a mental health issue, right? And there is that overlap. So it's important to talk about it and to think about these things. Like we had one guest whose father basically had a brain injury in Vegas. He slipped and fell, and it's crazy because his story, that is the journey his father went on after that fall. You talk about like, it's a dark humor movie, right? Like you think of like a Forrest Gump, right? You watch Forrest Gump and you watch his whole story. Well, you watch this one and it's kind of like a dark humor nightmare, right? Where he was a successful businessman, didn't touch alcohol. And then, now he's okay. So you can look back on this whole entire story and think, okay, like it worked out. But when you hear it, especially when you think of the Second Amendment 2A crowd, he went through some things, right, where he had to be red flagged.
Sure.
And he's like looking back on his life now saying, well, I was unfairly red flagged. And there's a lot of misunderstandings of the behavior, but it was because of the brain injury, right? And then how they were trying to treat the brain injury also had made issues with his body and his decision.
100%. Yeah. Or it might have made the brain even worse.
Yeah.
Because you're using the wrong tool for the wrong job.
Yeah, and most people aren't going to take the time like you did to do the research, right? Because that,
right.
You know, whether or not they have the freedom to do that or the ability to do that, or, you know, the right people in their corner that are cheering them on. I mean, there's all these different factors to it. So it's really, really fascinating. I mean, that part alone, we could just do a whole show on, right? Talking about brain health. So,
well, I think though that you bring up a really good point, which is he was kind of misdiagnosed until somebody finally got it figured out. Now, who's that on? Well, it's not incumbent upon me if I have a heart attack and I need heart surgery to go out and learn everything I can about the heart and learn how to do my own heart surgery. I have offloaded that through the cost of our healthcare system, through my insurance. I have offloaded that to a cardiologist. So if a cardiologist or a cardiothoracic surgeon then turns around and gets it wrong, that's on them, not on me. And so I think that we need to start holding the mental health community to a higher standard. Somebody walks in to go see a therapist, that therapist should be asking for blood labs. But that doesn't happen. That therapist should be saying, oh, you're depressed and you're a 42-year-old male. Maybe your testosterone levels are just down a whole lot lower than they should be. Like, you can cure some people's depression with just things like getting them more vitamin D. Mm-hmm. And so like, that's where like the mental health community, I think, is in a lot of the therapy community and therapist community needs to take a hard look at themselves and ask if they are actually potentially committing malpractice by not actually looking at the organ of the brain to see if that could potentially be why somebody is having some problems, rather than just the tell me about your childhood and then looking and nitpicking to see if they can find something that could potentially be a problem so they can keep that hourly rate going.
Right.
I mean, that's, and then we also need to take a hard look at the pharmaceutical community. And I love big pharma. I think big pharma saves so many people's lives. I mean, it really does. I have a sister with very severe MS. She's alive because of big pharma. So nobody can turn around and tell me that big pharma is this big evil machine that's just trying to hurt people, because there's a lot of people alive today who are alive because of the pharmaceutical companies that we have, who will spend $1 billion to try to make a solution for somebody's problem. That said, we do have an incentives problem. So the fact that we have doctors in the medical community and therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists who can be incentivized to prescribe people or misdiagnose and prescribe people medications that they don't need, that's the problem. So in my mind, it's an incentives alignment issue. So, we can't expect the pharmaceutical companies to be like, oh, well, let's get your vitamin D levels to where they need to be before we prescribe you some Xanax, because it's not in their best interest to do that. And at the same time, we do need to be holding those doctors and those prescribers accountable to making sure that they've done everything possible to try to solve the problem naturally, using the person's own biology before they then turn around and prescribe a drug.
We want to take a moment to recognize one of our sponsors, Chattanooga Shooting Supplies, Inc. CSSI was founded in 1977 by two families that had a passion for hunting and the outdoors. That same passion holds true today for the second generation of family members and their 200-plus employees. Own a gun store or range? If so, you understand the importance of two-step distribution to help you meet the demand of your customers. Their mission is to exceed their customers' expectations with a strong service focus from a knowledgeable sales staff, an assortment of trusted and well-known brands, competitive pricing, and timely shipping. With over 50,000 SKUs of shooting and hunting related products, they are in the business to help customers succeed. Learn more at ChattanoogaShooting.com.
Yeah. Normally we have another co-host on here. His name's Jake Wiskirchen. He's a therapist. He's a gun owning therapist. He would be, Kevin, tell me if I'm wrong. Right now he'd be coming out of his chair. He'd want to hug Nick through the, he literally is like that. What makes Jake so awesome, not only because of just the great work he does and all volunteer work he does, but his big thing is I always want to work myself out a job. I want people to be healthy.
Yes.
And you got to look at all angles of getting them healthy. And what you're saying, I think would really resonate with him. I'm almost wish he was on the show right now so he could just hear that, because I'm going to go to an example of myself. Right. And I'm going to tie it into what you said. Like, I think about the time when, I always battled energy issues. I used to run 1,000,000 miles an hour. And then as I got older, and I kept saying, oh, it's just because I'm getting older. Right. But literally found out that I was basically poisoning myself on a regular basis because I went and got a food allergy test. And two of the things that I ate the most were I was the most allergic to, right? Salmon and bananas. And
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Banana.
It was wild because I was like, wait a second. Because every time you think of like an allergic reaction, I think of your throat's supposed to close and you're supposed to fall on the floor and da 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 da. Right. And I remember this doctor was like, no, it's not how it works, man. Like sometimes like the brain fog you feel could be caused by your diet. Right. Like you think, because who thinks salmon is bad for you? Like nobody.
I've never even heard of a salmon allergy. I didn't even know that was a thing. So thanks for the education.
Yeah, no. So it's just like, I always tell people, especially with kids, I'm like, hey, go get the food allergy tested because, I have a daughter who's allergic to peanuts, but like, it, like I handed her a peanut butter M&M one time and almost killed her. Right. But not every kid's going to have that same reaction. So you might be feeding them something that you think is nutritious or something that helps them. And it could be working against their body chemistry.
So for me, that's gluten, that's cashews, right? That's grain-fed beef, grain-finished beef, salmon that is, or any fish that is kind of farm raised and fed basically just a bunch of wheat. Those things I notice affect me a lot. And that was one of the things that when I realized that something was wrong, right, I started with diet because I just figured it was all body related stuff. Plus I was in, a community of high performers with physical fitness evaluations we had to take. Nobody ever cares about passing that. You always care about like beating the other guys on your team, right? It's internally competitive. And so I was always trying to perform better. But then I kind of stumbled into the brain health space because I had kind of taken the physical health space as far as I knew how to take it. And so, it started by cleaning up my diet, but then I started getting more and more intentional about the things that I did to try to feed my brain, because what feeds your body, right? L-tyrosine doesn't really help your body that much, but it really helps your brain, right? L-theanine doesn't, same thing, L-theanine, L-leucine, things like Bacopa minori that you can take, or ginseng aren't really doing that much for your physical muscles and your body and your cardiovascular system, but boy, do they work magic on your brain.
Yeah. So I want to kind of circle back to, you said something about big pharma, right?
Sure.
And I love what you said there, because most people think of big pharma as this like enemy, right? Like
sure,
just because of the way, and I'm real big on not doing that. I hate grouping things together. I like nuance. I like to talk about, the different ways to look at something. And I kind of want to look at what you're doing using AI and working with government to tackle sex trafficking.
Sure.
We have a lot of listeners, they're gun people, and they're very skeptical of government and they're skeptical of AI, okay. Right? Like, I think it's great what you're doing, because my theory about government is if you can get any type of government agency to focus on real important issues that affect lives and like potentially could stop destroying people's lives, I think that's great, right? Have you come across people that push back on your methods when it comes to human trafficking?
Oh yeah, Pornhub has spent a ton of money getting people to write hit pieces about me and the work that we do at Deliver Fund. And to me, like, bring it on, Pornhub, right? I mean, like, you're a dragon to slay as far as I'm concerned, right? David took down Goliath, and we are made to slay dragons, and your enemies define you. So I don't shy back from that at all. But I will say something about the government. I meet a lot of people who are very pro-veteran, right? Love, especially the special ops community, because, and it's not to take away from any other vet out there, right? At the end of the day, I might have got to do some real cool guy stuff, but I ate good food. I slept in a, clean, dry, plywood room that I didn't build. And I had my own heat and air, and I had a gym, and like, I didn't do any of that. Those were all resources that somebody else provided so that I could do my job. And so all veterans are equally important, but some get to do cooler stuff than others, right? And I got to be one of those. And so in the soft community, I get lots of people like, oh man, I mean, just thank you for your service. It's so amazing. And, the CIA is listening to us. And I'm like, well, you can't be both pro-soft veteran and anti-CIA, because who the heck do you think the CIA uses to do their stuff, right? Like the raid against Osama bin Laden was not a SEAL Team 6 mission. It was a CIA mission that SEAL Team 6 executed. So your JSOC elements, like the biggest heroes we have in our country, they're executing missions for the intelligence community. Do you think that dirty bombs aren't blowing up in rush hour traffic because the bad guys aren't trying? Or is it that there's a bunch of really good men and women who are overseas putting their lives on the line, some of whom die, and the only thing that they get is a star on the wall in headquarters in Langley, and their name in a book that their parents don't even get to go see. And then their wife doesn't even get to know why they died. So this like anti-government stance, like if you like your roads, if you like it when you call 911, the fact that an ambulance shows up, if you like it that, you have law enforcement officers, and you should, this anti-government stance is quite frankly, it's uneducated. Mm-hmm. Now, with that, what I will say is I have questions. After working in the government at the highest levels there are for 17 years, why was it that we don't have a counter human trafficking agency? Because the 13th Amendment to the Constitution makes all human slavery illegal, and human trafficking is just a fancy word for slavery. So where's our counter human trafficking agency? We don't have one. Well, if you go to a ophthalmologist to get a retina surgery, they're going to put cocaine on your eye to numb the retina so they can do their work. So cocaine is a legal drug. It's on a schedule, right, for specific purpose, legal for specific purposes, but it's a legal drug. Yet we have a drug enforcement agency where we spend billions and billions of dollars a year fighting what is the illicit sale of legal commodities, and yet we don't have a counter human trafficking agency. And here's one that your listeners will really like that I have a lot of questions about. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms are all legal commodities, all of them. Kevin probably has all three of them within arm's reach of himself right now. And yeah, you smile and see, it's true. But we have a Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which spends billions of dollars a year fighting the illicit sale of these legal commodities. Why? Because when those laws are broken, that's something that the FBI can easily handle, and state and local law enforcement can easily handle. So why aren't we taking that money and putting it towards basically creating a version of the ATF or the DEA, but very specific to fighting human slavery and human exploitation writ large? Because there's also, child pornography and things like that are obviously equally gross, even though they're not human trafficking. So let's just take those billions of dollars and those good men and women that are doing that work, I say good men and women for the most part. I'm painting with a broom. There's outliers, and go fight human trafficking. So there, just because there are parts of the government we don't like doesn't mean that the entirety of the government is bad. In fact, the entirety of the government, for the most part, is a bunch of really good men and women doing their best and doing it for very little pay, for the betterment of the country. You cannot compensate a CIA operative who's on the field in Pakistan right now for the work that they're doing. Because most people, if you gave them $1 million a year, they still would not go do that. And that person's doing it for like $120 a year. So, and they're gone 10 months a year and they're sick half the time. When I was in Pakistan, I lost 15 pounds. No, I'm sorry. I lost 15 pounds the first deployment. By the end of the year, a year's worth of deployments, I was down to 165 pounds. I'm normally 205. And why was I that sick? Because I was operating in environments that were making me that sick. So you can't have this, like, the people with this just complete anti-government stance. I just ignore them because they're uneducated and they don't know what they're talking about. And when their child goes missing, the very first thing they're going to do is call 911.
Yeah.
And who's going to show up? Who's going to show up is somebody who's overworked and underpaid and is willing to get up at 2:00 in the morning to go take the report to help them get their child back, because they're not going to be the one getting their child back. I mean, everybody likes to talk tough, but the reality is they're not going to, because they don't have the skills. They don't have the ability, probably cognitive or physical ability, to go get their own child back. So we need all of those people in the government. That said, we also do need to ask some questions about why certain things exist and others don't.
Yeah, checks and balances. And let me ask you this question. What's your personal opinion on why you don't think we have a task force designed to go after human trafficking? Like, that's a great question that you brought up.
Because victims of human trafficking are not a constituency that votes. And the incentives for our politicians are completely misaligned. I mean, my wife and I are, we're nerds, unabashedly. So we really watch TV. We watch kind of educational stuff. And right now we're working our way through some Federalist Papers classes from Hillsdale. And one of the things that has dawned on me is whether you're a Federalist or anti-Federalist, right? In the early days, you had these very, very bright, well-educated, articulate men and women who were trying to honestly figure out what was the best for the country. And they were all scholars, but they were all also warriors and farmers and ranchers. And they were very, very capable people. And today, who do we have? Marjorie Taylor Greene, that senator, I don't remember her name, the one who said that the moon was made of gas. We have completely lost the intellectual nature that our country was founded upon. And so and I think a large part of that is because the incentives are completely misaligned within the government. And so we have congressmen and senators and city councilors and mayors and governors and all these people who will talk about how human trafficking is terrible. Yet the state of California's legislature just had an opportunity to upgrade the penalties from a misdemeanor to a felony when a person purchases a child for sex, and they declined to do so. Why? We have politicians who are under investigation for human trafficking and having, sex with 17-year-olds. And we, within our political class, we have all kinds of just weird sexual perversions. And so I think you start combining all of those things, and it makes a lot of sense that nobody actually wants to put their money where their mouth is on this issue. And one of the pieces of advice that I give, different groups that I talk to, and same thing for your listeners now, is when you go talk to your politicians, show up at those city council meetings, show up at their gubernatorial race, show up at the Senate race, and ask them, what do you think about human trafficking? And they're all going to, lots of wringing of hands and mashing of teeth, and they're going to talk about how it's the most important thing, and they're going to do something about it. And you say, great. Please show me the budget line item that is funding our city's counter human trafficking task force. And they'll make all kinds of excuses why they don't have one. but the gangs unit is fully funded. The property crimes unit is fully funded. The narcotics unit is fully funded. So we're saying that, the auto theft unit is fully funded and fully staffed. So we're saying that stolen cars are more important than stolen kids, because that's what they're saying with the way that they're allocating their budgets. And that is because the human trafficking victim is not a constituency that votes. I believe it is that simple. Okay, well, that means it's up to us to be their voice and to start holding our politicians accountable for creating the solutions that we all know how to create. They just have to fund them.
That's a great question, or segue into a question, because a lot of people, when they ask me about Walk the Talk America and the things that we've accomplished, and people say like, what was your light bulb moment, or how did you make this happen? And I always say like a lot of luck, and then a lot of supporters that I had that believed in what I was doing. Right. And all my funding comes from the firearms industry. I get no funding from grants or the US government or anything like that. How did you start with your project? Like, cause I mean, there's a cost to everything, right? And,
oh yeah. Oh yeah. We're the largest, and cleanest, counter human trafficking database on the planet. I mean, billions and billions of data points. We have 3 of our own supercomputers. I started this out of my retirement account until that was gone. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, I should probably figure out how to start raising some money, it turns out you have to do marketing for that. Man, I was a CIA operative. I'm the guy who's the expert in keeping you off the grid, not getting you onto the grid, not getting you, not drawing attention. So that was, you could say, a bit of a learning curve that I'm still in the middle of. I didn't even have a website until I think about a month and a half ago. And so it's just one of those things. Again, I make the joke, but it's actually not a joke when I say I'm just proof that God uses the foolish things of this world to accomplish his ends, because I had no idea what I knew how to do the work, but I didn't know how to build the infrastructure and the apparatus to enable the work. And that is just something that I just had to learn the hard way over a decade.
Yeah, no, I that speaks right to my heart, man. Trust me. I was fortunate enough to sell my company in 2019. I self-funded what we were doing the first couple of years. And there were times when I went home and I looked at my wife and I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm blowing this, right? Like, you're not supposed to go backwards. You're supposed to keep going up. But when you believe in something and you believe that you could change the way the country feels about human trafficking or do something about it, like, I think there's those people that are like, I'm going to do it and I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Right. And, I'm glad you did. How do you define human trafficking, by the way? I think that's a lot of listeners might be listening to this going, well, what exactly, everyone has an idea.
Sure.
But what's your definition?
So I'll give you there's the academic and legal definitions. I'll give you a very simple definition. And just to kind of set some context before I do, human trafficking is not a southern border issue. Are there people who get trafficked across the southern border? Sure. But it's very, very small. The major majority of people who come across the southern border, it's human smuggling. And that's an important distinction. And so when we talk about human trafficking, what we're talking about is when one person is defrauded, forced, or coerced by another person into providing a service or labor for the other person's economic benefit. So it's slavery. When you have somebody who is enslaved for the economic benefit of somebody else, that is human trafficking. Transporting somebody across a border, even though that's a whole issue that needs to be tackled, and I can make lots of national security arguments and also compassion arguments on why, we need to build a wall. That's a really good idea. However, and that's not a political statement, that is just a statement of fact. However, that is not human trafficking. And one of the things that has really irritated me is how politicians have tried to commingle human trafficking and human smuggling for political purposes. The major majority of human trafficking victims, and I'm talking over, I believe it's over 86% of human trafficking victims in the United States that are victims in DOJ cases, are citizens of the United States of America. They were born here and they never left. The major majority of human traffickers are U.S. citizens. They were born here and they never left. And almost all of the customers of human trafficking, of the services that human traffickers provide, are U.S. citizens. So this is not, the pretty blonde middle-class teenager gets abducted and taken to Dubai and sold, a la the movie Taken. Does that happen? Yes, but it's extremely rare. The major majority of human trafficking that happens in America is a 14-year-old girl just went to her room and made a TikTok video saying that she's mad at her dad because he won't let her wear the miniskirt to school. And that human trafficker slides into her DMs and starts manipulating her and grooming her and saying, oh, that's just because you're so pretty and your dad's just trying to keep you from growing up. Here, let me send you an Amazon gift card. Oh, hey, you're so pretty. Why don't you send me a photo? Hey, send me another photo. And eventually she sends a photo that she regrets. And then he uses that in what we call sextortion to coerce her into essentially running away into his arms because she thinks that he's going to solve all of her problems. Right. So it's manipulation, it's grooming. That's the reality of human trafficking in the United States. And so if you're trying to figure out what is human trafficking and what is not, just think about this. Who is doing the thing, service or labor? Who is financially benefiting from it? And is the person financially benefiting from it defrauding, forcing, or coercing the other person into doing the work? And if the answer to those is yes, you have a human trafficking situation.
For almost 75 years, Strum, Ruger and Company Incorporated has been a model of corporate and community responsibility. Their motto, Arms Makers for Responsible Citizens, echoes their commitment to these principles as they work hard to deliver quality and innovative firearms. They offer consumers almost 800 variations of more than 40 product lines across both the Ruger and Marlin brands. And since 2021, Ruger has been a strong supporter of Walk the Talk America in full alignment with this mission and philosophy. We invite you to check out Ruger.com and browse their multiple products and help support our mission along the way. Walk the Talk America thanks Ruger for its continued support of this show and our mission.
Okay. So, I love that you're bringing the reality to most people who are bitching about the southern border. And it's like, there's a southern border in your house that you have to secure. It's called your internet, and your kids are all over it, and it's social media, and it's very dangerous. Right. I think about, even with my kids, like I had to stay one step ahead of them because every time I would find, I have two daughters and they're older now, but in the beginning it was like they were going on social media platforms that I wasn't even aware of. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, I got you on Instagram and now I got you, it's like, you got to stay on top of it because kids find a way. And that's the scary part for it. When you, in your work, like with the scope of everything, I'm sure you find little tiny things that are just like out of pocket in rural areas and maybe cities. But then you probably uncover like larger situations, right? Like,
so it depends. Human trafficking today is not like it was in, say, the 1980s or 1990s. This is not this Pablo Escobar-ish, or mafia type top-down hierarchy. Like that's not really the way things go today. And it's even the same thing in largely, and it can be that way in narcotics and terrorism as well. It's what I like to call loose affiliation of like minds. You know other people in your business because you're in that business. Well, bad guys are the same way. And so human traffickers will coordinate, they work together. We don't really see, outside of the illicit massage parlors where there's human trafficking happening, that's different, the illicit massage businesses. But by and large, most of what we see is, individual actors who are coordinating with other individual actors. That is still a network, but it's an informal one.
How much closure do you get to what you uncover? Like, do you work hand in hand? So like, for example, you spot something, you notify, the authorities, or you work hand in hand with agencies, or you're teaching them to look for this stuff too. But how much
Yep.
closure do you get? Because I almost feel like the way you're approaching this with this data driven, like, AI going on social media and the internet, it's almost like you're what do they call it? Like a 911 responder, right? We've had operators literally come on and tell us, they're like, yeah, sometimes we get zero closure to a call. Like, we don't
Yeah.
know how it ended. Like, do you always
So we're the same way. The cases that we've been involved in that have gone to court that we are aware of, every single one of them has ended in a successful prosecution. Most of them end in plea deals just because the data is so, the evidence is just so overwhelming and so damning. There are plenty of cases that are, once the cases go into our system, they might be there for a while before they actually before a law enforcement officer can finally get to them. And that's, I think, an important piece for us to understand is that state and local law enforcement aren't all connected on the same platform. And that's a real problem, right? CSI Miami is not a follow documentary. Turns out that's fiction. And I was very naive being at the agency, and then, special ops before that, because we just have so many toys and there's so much connectivity and so many enablers that make all of that system happen. I just assumed law enforcement was just a cookie cutter version of that, just that did different things in the United States. I didn't realize how little they are resourced. And the law enforcement departments in the United States that do have detectives that are fighting human trafficking, and I would say probably only 20 to 30% of them actually do. We have over 18,000 different law enforcement jurisdictions in the United States. And that's a whole other problem we have to address, but that's a different conversation for a different time. We have all of these different entities. None of them are on the same platform, really, and so they don't communicate. So if you have a human trafficker in Omaha, Nebraska, that then moves to, say, Dallas, Texas, if those law enforcement officers don't know each other, they have to, for the most part, call the same number you or I would have to call and ask to talk to a detective. So the system is not interconnected, and that's one of the big problems that we solve through a platform that we have called PATH, which stands for the Platform for the Analysis and Targeting of Human Traffickers. PATH will coordinate different entities across the United States if they're working in that platform. And the AI will say, hey, Michael and Nick, you guys have a common target that you're both hunting. You should start talking to each other, and it'll actually help people understand when they have common points of interest and commonality. And we're getting ready, thanks to the generosity of our donors, we're getting ready to launch sometime this summer PATH 2.0, which is going to be a whole technology suite that's getting us closer to where we want to get, which is just one pane of glass. And we want to get into the space where we can extrapolate, not predict, because predictive policing is bad, but where we can extrapolate past behavior into what is most likely going to be future behavior. So we can say, okay, this person shows up, this trafficker shows up every Tuesday at this strip club with this victim and forces her to dance on the stage. Chances are next Tuesday, that trafficker is going to show up and force that victim to dance on the stage, and be able to provide that kind of pattern of life information for law enforcement.
Yeah. We always say the only future predictor of violence is previous violence, not, there's no such thing as Minority Report when it comes to gun ownership and mental health, right? Like that's what makes it so difficult, because people are like, well, someone who has schizophrenia shouldn't own a gun. And it's like, that's not how that works. Someone with schizophrenia could own a gun their whole life and never hurt a fly, So I like what you're doing there, looking back. I know if I don't circle back to this, I know I'm going to get a lot of crap from people. It's not every day that someone says Pornhub is trying to kill me.
Well, they're not trying to kill me, but they are definitely trying to shut down
I get your
my
character. I get
organization.
it.
They're trying to cost me a bunch of money. Yeah,
Right. What do you mean by that?
sure. So, a bunch of your listeners about to get real uncomfortable.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to do it.
If you, every father I know, especially fathers of daughters, when you talk to them, you're like, what would you do if your daughter was being trafficked, your daughter was being sold? And they're like, have you seen the movie Man on Fire? Right? That's the way they think about it. For those who haven't seen it, it's basically a guy a former guy like me goes completely rogue trying to save a child. And so that's what they say. It's like, okay, awesome. Then how do you justify logging into that website and abusing somebody else's daughter? Because that's what they're doing. And we know for a fact, and this is per the Department of Justice, charged Pornhub and a couple other companies with human trafficking. And Pornhub settled. Right. Now, I don't know the exact circumstance around that, but when the Department of Justice is willing to charge you with a crime that is as hard to prove as human trafficking is, there's a lot of smoke there. And so we were pointing that out for quite a while. It happened. There's always been a connection between human trafficking and pornography. That's extremely well documented. It's not even up for argument. There is a massive connection between human trafficking and prostitution. No little girl says, you know what I want to do when I grow up? I want to sell my body to strange men for sex. Like that's not a thing. And no, sex work is not work, and I will die on that hill. And this is why the prostitution community really likes to come after me. Well, who funds the prostitution community? Largely the pornography community. So the human traffickers learned, and they've known this for even pre-COVID, that they can make very low risk money by forcing their victims to participate in pornography. Well, during COVID, when they couldn't get the face-to-face meetings anymore, as a way to put it politely, so that, because everybody was terrified of whether or not they were going to get COVID and die. Well, what did they do? They turned to online pornography. And what COVID taught them was that they can make a lot of money, really low risk, by forcing their victims to start an OnlyFans, where they get the money. By forcing their victims to act in pornography and putting that on Pornhub and various sites like that, where they get the money. So it's not up for debate whether or not human trafficking and pornography and human trafficking and prostitution have a significant overlap. I mean, we know that for a fact. And so that is why the pornography industry is not a very big fan of what it is that we do. And we also have the data to prove it. So we can show you exactly which commercial sex advertisements are also present on pornography sites. I mean, we can draw correlations with data. And that's one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on, is we have the data to prove our points. And so for, the statistics say that 70% of the men listening to us have this conversation right now are active pornography users. Well, you are feeding money into a cycle that exploits people. And if that's okay with you, okay, fine. But don't pretend like that's not what's happening.
Do you think that there is obviously, I don't know the details, but when you say like Pornhub tries to character assassinate me and my work, right? Mm-hmm. They have their reasons and everything like that. But is there any pornography outfits that have tried to say, we want to do something about this? Because I would think that you'd be a great person to have at the table for a conversation, whether or not you agree with pornography as a whole, but like being able to say, this is what you need to look for, right? Like, do any pornographers care?
We have yet to find one.
It's interesting.
So I can't say that. In fact, if you, I'm sure you got a computer in front of you right now. If you just Google Pornhub DOJ, the very first thing that you get is a press release from the Department of Justice. So not some random mainstream media outlet with an agenda, even though obviously the Department of Justice has their own agenda too. I'll be the first to admit that. But it says that Pornhub parent company admits to receiving proceeds of sex trafficking. Like, they admitted to it. And so that's how egregious this is. And we have yet to find a pornography company. Now, am I going to, I don't agree with pornography. I don't use pornography. I don't think other people should. That's somebody else's daughter, mother, wife, whatever. Like, humans should not be exploited for other people's gratification. Like, that's just something that shouldn't happen. However, pornography is legal. And so if somebody came to us and said, hey, we're going to agree to disagree on what it is that we do, but we want some help keeping human trafficking out of it, we'd be the first to help them. And there was a woman, a firm that specialized in accounting for OnlyFans models. Now, I completely disagree with what OnlyFans, especially the women who are choosing to put themselves on OnlyFans. Like, you're worth more than that. So, stop allowing yourself to be exploited by other men. But there was a woman who specialized in the accounting for OnlyFans models. And we worked with her so that she could help to make sure that none of the clients that she had were human traffickers and participating in that industry. So that's a great example of, like, we'll agree to disagree, but we can work together. Well, to at least advance the ball a little bit.
That's I bring that up just to draw another parallel to the work at WTTA. There's a consulting aspect to what my team does, right? We work hand in hand with a lot of people that I know hate guns. I know they hate them. I could feel it. You know what I mean? But like, they put that aside because they're like, I see you guys doing something that's completely different. And this is about saving lives, right? Like, saving lives. And sometimes you have to put that aside. And that's what I always tell, I always try to tell my people, like, when I say my people, like the 2A community, if I don't talk to, say, like a Moms Demand Action or Giffords, right? If I don't sit down and have conversations, like, I know nothing will ever get done. You know what I mean?
Right.
And one side will have a narrative that they'll completely control, and we'll have our narrative, right? But it's like, I'll work with anybody, especially if they want to come up with solutions to save lives. And it's really interesting because sometimes I have to talk to people that I know I'm going to take a lot of flack for sitting down with, because people are going to be like, why are you talking to them? And it's like, they're anti-gun.
If you're a firearms owner, and especially if you carry concealed, we invite you to enroll in a membership with our partner, the United States Concealed Carry Association, at uscca.com. The USCCA is more than 700,000 Americans from every faith, political stance, and walk of life, spanning multiple demographics. They provide life-saving education and industry-leading training, some of which comes in the form of our firearms and mental health videos that we have recently produced and which will be made available to the membership over the next 12 months. We recommend that you obtain self-defense liability insurance available through Delta Defense and the USCCA, so that if you find yourself in an act of lawful self-defense, you will be prepared for what happens before, during, and after that incident. With the common mission of saving lives, Walk the Talk America is proud to partner with the USCCA and Delta Defense, and we invite you to check out all they have to offer at uscca.com.
Anybody who has such an absolutist view of the world is probably intellectually pretty stunted. I mean, when I was overseas and we were working with warlords, these Islamo-fascist states and warlords, trust me, they hated me. Right? I was the blue-eyed devil from Montana. They didn't like me. I don't particularly care for them. I don't know or like their culture. They didn't know or like mine. We don't even speak the same language, but we did have a common enemy for a short period of time, and we could come together to work together. But then we made it our job to get out of there as fast as possible, because we knew that as soon as we eliminated this common enemy, then we were no longer going to have a common enemy, which meant that they were going to come after us. And those are the types of things that you saw happen in Libya and, in places like that. So the way I look at it is, if I can work with a warlord who would like to put me in an orange jumpsuit and put me on YouTube, and you know what the ending is, then I can probably work with people that I disagree with here. And again, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier with the Federalist Papers and the founding of the country and the founding of the Constitution, you had these highly intellectual people who had some pretty staunch disagreements, but they were able to come together and create what is probably the best political document that has ever existed in the history of the earth. So that is the power of when people can come together, and you're never going to align completely. You and Giffords, you're never going to align. However, there's probably a lot of things that you do agree with. And let me give you a good example. And we'll take it completely out of the 2A space, take it out of porn and human trafficking and all that. Let's talk the green movement. So I live in Montana. We have a lot of oil. I spend a lot of time in Texas, and they have a lot of oil, right? And so we'll have other people who think that we shouldn't be burning oil. And I can talk to both groups and say, hey, you guys actually have a lot in common. The folks who want to burn oil don't want us to be feeding money into our enemies and buying oil from them. So there's a national security and a nationalist argument. The folks who don't want us to burn oil want us to limit the amount of oil that we are burning because of greenhouse gases and all that, global warming. Okay, great. You guys actually want the same thing. So why wouldn't we invest in technologies that can reduce reliance while still allowing people to make, the choice to have a truck like I have in the parking lot, which doesn't exactly get the best mileage? Why can't we do that? And if somebody wants to drive an electric car, great. And if somebody wants to drive a diesel Ram, great. But by coming together, we're gonna burn less oil, which means we're not going to need to buy as much from our enemies that then want to use that money to hurt our country. Oh, and by the way, the other side gets what they want too. So I think oftentimes different groups actually want the same thing, but for different reasons. Who cares what their reason is? It's the outcome that we should all be focused on. And so if we want to save lives, great. We probably have some common ground. Gunners, pro 2A and anti 2A probably have some common ground where we could advance the ball 5%, 10%. And what's interesting about market disruption economics is when you look at the cumulative mathematics across the board, you start to find that small percentages of disruption at strategic points in a value chain actually lead to a very, very large progress towards an outcome that both people want.
Yeah, no, that's get it on the head there. I always say the outcome that we're looking for is to reduce negative outcomes of firearms and save lives, right? And that's an island that we can get to. I'll go to that island with you. We might have different approaches, but as long as I can present
different boats,
different boats, but I need to be able to present what I need to present to you. And a lot of times we talk about the unintentional consequences of people thinking they're doing the right thing to reduce those numbers. And I live in a different space, right? Take, for example, red flag laws. I listened to a seminar today from 97%, which is an organization out there that they have their take on red flag laws and they obviously love them, but I live in a completely different world, right? I live in a world where people contact Walk the Talk America and say I'm afraid of getting help because of the red flag law, or they say I will never get help because of the red flag law in my state. So how many people don't go get help all that data that 97% has, or, Moms Demand Action has, like, that's great. And they have these anecdotal stories that are amazing. But I'm like, how many people died because they didn't go get help? Like, they stayed unhealthy. I can point to anecdotal stories of people actually taking their own life with a firearm because they were afraid to get help. And that needs to be appreciated too, because nowhere in your data, when you say our red flag laws saved 98% of the whatever, or stop 50 something percent, like, okay, that, you know what I mean? You have a lot of things missing out of that data. So that's why it's important to have the conversations. And like you said, find the common goal and then kind of weed out the nuttiness around it.
And think deeply about the problem. Like, get out of the headline and actually think deeply about it and play the chess game out and be able to articulate the other person's side. I mean, that's I think the biggest problem we have in most of the issues that are plaguing our country today. And 2A and anti-2A is it's one of these examples, is intellectual laziness. People just don't want to sit around and think for hours and draw things out and write things out and, test their theories with other, intellectuals. They don't want to do that. They just want to take these absolutist positions on their hill and say, I'm willing to die on this hill. And the reality is they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like they also don't understand sometimes that people have different hills, and some of those hills outrank the other hills,
Right.
So it's like, if you can't, you're un-American if you are not for the Second Amendment. And I'm like, well, my mother is for the Second Amendment, but believe me, she has other hills to die on. Right. Like, so maybe if we convince my mom to make a good argument for the Second Amendment, and she's talking to her group of people that are anti-2A, she can help sway them a little bit on that thing. If we don't talk to my mother, you know what I mean? I know exactly where she's going to go with her belief system, because I know the hill she dies on,
Right.
Yeah. So it's fascinating, but I know we're up against time here, and I could talk to you all day, brother. It's been great. But I need to ask you two more things. One, what's it like walking to Earth being known as the real Jack Ryan?
Oh, it's just, it's proof that Hollywood can make anybody look good.
Wait, were you married by the time you got crowned that?
Yes. Yeah. So if you watch the real Jack Ryan little mini documentary that they did, you can find it on my YouTube, which is at the.nick.McKinley. You can see, like, my son had my son been born? I don't remember. But my daughter's very young in it. And, my wife kind of gives the story about kind of how we met. And yeah, it's, I like to tell people, Jack Ryan, Jason Bourne, all those people, they don't exist. What they are is about 20 different people all wrapped into one. And nobody can speak 7 languages and fight and shoot and have a PhD in economics, and like that's just more than one person can do. When the CIA was first started and the OSS was first started, what Donovan said he wanted was PhDs that could win bar fights. Now, back then, when universities were a meritocracy, a lot of your PhDs were also very, very athletic. That's not really the case today. And so today, what the CIA has is lots of the PhD academic types and lots of very bright people who can win bar fights. They don't have a lot of people who are the same person.
Yeah, that's, I mean, God, I can only imagine though, like, I would lean into that. I would just be like, I am Jack Ryan.
Yeah, of course.
Like I said, how great would it have been if you were single? Like, you could have like set that up. You know what I mean? Like, who's that on the phone you're talking to? Oh,
it probably would have worked out to my benefit.
Another agent. All right, let me ask you one question.
Mike, I had one before your template one.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Been avoiding the conversation with my cough and sick that my children lovely gave me, but Eddie Davenport asked a question. He was agreeing with you. He wishes he could kind of ask for blood tests because he's a mental health professional and kind of tying all the healthcare in. Where would you kind of lead people if someone's listening to this and wants to explore their own brain health? I mean, you're a former CIA operative, probably does research a little better than the average person. So how would you kind of point someone to start looking into that journey and doing their own research to find maybe some solutions that they've been struggling finding?
So your primary care provider should be part of your mental health and brain health journey. So yes, your average, master's degree therapist cannot, they can't order blood labs, right? But you can, and there's plenty of places that you can just go online to do that. You can also authorize your therapist or whoever you're working with from a mental health perspective to communicate with your primary care provider. And if your primary care provider is not willing to do that, go find another primary care provider. And if you're a primary care provider and you're not willing to do that, go get another job. I mean, it's your doctors, your medical professionals in your life should all want to coordinate. Like they should really want to do that. Now, sometimes depending on the state, there's different rules where they can't really ask you or they're not allowed to do different things, but you are allowed to tell any of your healthcare professionals anything you want to tell them. And you are allowed to ask them to do anything that you want them to do, and whether or not they'll do it is, there's a whole host of factors that goes into that. So I would just say use your primary care provider as just that, right? They're really your healthcare integrator, and then you can go find an endocrinologist and then go talk to your primary care provider and say, hey, I need a referral to this endocrinologist for this reason. And hey, I would really appreciate it if you would order these blood labs. And it's pretty easy to figure out what those are. And your therapist or, psychologist will probably help you with that. And I would like you to send the results to this person or give me the results and I will hand carry them into that person. Right. So there's lots of ways that you can use your primary care provider to coordinate and be an advocate for your overall brain health.
Yeah, it's super important to understand that as somebody who has no filter, and I talk about all the things in my life and my past. Mm-hmm. I remember going one time to the doctor, and the doctor literally running labs on me, and we found out my testosterone was like non-existent, right? And I always equated testosterone to sex, right? And my doctor was like, don't do that. That's not necessarily the key indicator that you have bad testosterone, right? Just because you still feel like that, and you could get in that mood. And it was crazy what getting on a testosterone therapy regimen did for my health, right? It did for me being able to get back into fitness, get back into shape. These are things as men and then women, right? Women have issues there. Yeah. Like, I think figuring out what's going on with your body and not accepting, this is the way it is because I'm older, or, when people say, well, you're old now, like, don't accept that. Like, when you feel bad, don't stop until you figure out what makes you feel good.
Fight aging with a flamethrower.
Yes. Yes. All right. So I thank you for coming on. Like I said, it's we were really excited. Kevin and I were talking before the show, and I was just like, man, what do we do with this guest? Because we could have just talked about, your past in just the CIA alone, right? Or your Air Force days, like. And that could have been the whole show. So, I really appreciate you being able to like bounce around topics with us and coming on here. How do you tend to your mental health?
So I tend to predominantly focus on my brain health. And I notice that when I do that, my mental health takes care of itself. Now, that may not work for everybody, but it works for me. Now, I also pay a lot more attention than I used to. So I'm coming off of 10 days of travel over the last 15 days, and I am exhausted. And so Monday, I just worked from home, which was kind of like, I answered some emails, very, very light work, because I knew if I would have just jumped right back into it, then I'm going to start a process that I call spiraling. I have some medications that I use to help with that. So I have a modafinil prescription as an example. It's magic. It works wonders when that starts to happen. I take a handful of about 20 some pills in the morning and probably another 15 or 16 pills in the afternoon, most of which are just supplements, actually, in order to keep my brain health levels where they need to be. And I find that, again, my mental health just kind of takes care of itself. My wife is absolutely amazing at pointing out when I need to jump on the motorcycle and just go ride, or I need to go do something else, because she tends to kind of see it coming before anybody else. And then I've shifted my priorities so that the things that I say are important to me, actually I am executing on the fact that they're important to me. And that's kind of hard to explain, but that's what I do. I don't do any of this. I get up in the morning and I do a cold plunge, and then I have my smoothie, and then I do yoga, and then I go for a walk, and then I meditate. Right. And that is what I like to call perception of productivity. I not only run Deliver Fund, which is like one of my full-time jobs. I also have a company called GoPills, gopills.com. I'm part of that company. I just closed a venture round on another tech company, and I have a venture capital consulting practice. And so I'm a busy guy. So I need to just get to it. But when I need to turn off, I turn all the way off. And I think that's kind of important for me as well.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, you kind of summed up where people could get a hold of you, or at least check out what you do. Is there anything you want to add to that? If someone's like, hey, I'd like to know more about Nick, like where?
Sure. You find me on LinkedIn at the Nick McKinley. Instagram, same thing. It's just at the.nick.mckinley. I don't really pay attention. I think I have accounts at other things that my team predominantly runs, but I don't pay attention to them. And then you can find me at my website, nicmckinley.com.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you for coming on. A great show. I want to thank our sponsors that make this all possible: the Rugers, the Arms Corps, the USCCAs, Lipsies, Davidsons, all these organizations that have really gone against the grain, right? And really made the mission of Walk the Talk America possible. I want to thank all the listeners for tuning in, and appreciate your continued support. And we wish you great mental wellness, and we will actually see you tomorrow. We have another show tomorrow, Kevin. So take care.